Good morning.
Now, we've still got a few names to go, I think, on the Warrnambool Pioneer Board. So who are we dipping into this morning?
Well, I'm talking about James Astley Bromfield. He was an Englishman, like a lot of them, and like a lot of people, came to Warrnambool in 1853. I wouldn't mind $1 for every man that came from the goldfields to Warrnambool in 1853. But he came out to meet out with his brother, who'd been here earlier, and his brother is John Davenport Bromfield,
right?
And he's also on our Pioneer Board.
Okay.
Although he has very little connection with Warrnambool, but he did own a lot of land in Warrnambool. But John Davenport's history is in Birregurra and Colac.
Right.
So in Colac, Bromfield Street is actually named after John Davenport
that one, right,
Bromfield.
Yeah. Okay.
And ours, James Astley Bromfield, is always known as just Astley.
Right.
He signed his name just Astley.
Right. Because there would have been a lot of Jameses at the time, would there?
I think he, thought that was probably rather aristocratic.
Yeah, right.
He came to Warrnambool in 1853, and he was here 36 years. And he had an amazing connection with nearly everything that went on in Warrnambool. But he was a chemist. And he opened a chemist shop, first of all, in Timor Street. And then in the 1860s, he moved to Liebig Street. And he was renting a place, but he then bought the land, and he built a building, and he pulled it down, and he built a big chemist shop right next to it, on the east side of Liebig Street.
Right.
He had a house. He had several houses, but his main house was named Ashton in Canterbury Road, and that's of interest because when James Bromfield left town, left Warrnambool, he sold it to James Scott, who had a private school, and the building was then extensively added to, remodelled, and then it became another private school, and then it was sold to the Christian Brothers, and it's still the remnants of that home is still the old building in Emmanuel College.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it's Bromfield's house.
Right. How much of it still survives? Do we know? Can you look at it and see that
the two-storey section is that James Scott really built onto the older section. They're both still there, as far as I know.
So that would be the campus that's just opposite the Botanic Gardens. That's the area we're talking about, isn't it? Yeah, right.
Yes. Now, Astley Bromfield was a town councillor for 9 years, and then he was a Shire councillor for another 9 years, and he was also president of the Shire Council for a number of years. And his major hobby, really, his interest was in horses. And so he had a small stud. Actually, the famous horse Panic was in his stud for some time.
We've heard the story of before, yes.
He was a foundation member of what they call the Amateur Turf Club in the 1850s, and even the Coursing Club he was interested in. But I don't know if he ever was in his chemist shop, but he was the trustee or a committee member of the following: the Savings Bank, the Western Steam Navigation Company, the Gasworks, the Harbour Committee, the Agricultural Society, the Hospital, the Fire Brigade, the Anglers Protection Society, and he was also a very devoted member of the Anglican Church.
Right.
And the ornamental screen at the back of the altar there was what he donated. I think it's called a reredos or something like that. And he was also a keen cricketer, and he often captained the teams that, not necessarily the sort of best grade cricket in the town, but matches against other, I think, sort of older people at the time.
Right.
Now, what he is most famous for, from our point of view, he had an interest in history. So we regard him almost as one of our first historians, because in 1856, as part of the promotion for his chemist shop, he produced a very big map called The Map of Warrnambool and its Agricultural District, 1856. And this map, particularly for the area around Warrnambool contains all the names of the original landowners. And so, of course, it's a seminal source of history today, and there are many what we'd call original copies, although I think it would have been reproduced. But when we see one on the back of linen or something like that, we know it's a very old copy. So it's one of our great sources of history. In the late 1880s, he shifted to Melbourne, and he died in Melbourne, but he appears to be buried in Warrnambool. And, of course, Bromfield Street is named after him here.
Right.
And if you always got a street named after you if you're a councillor, and, of course, he'd had 18 years. So,
but not 18 streets,
so
luckily.
got it in. So he seems to me to be very high profile, very interesting sort of man to have been involved in, I'd say, absolutely everything.
Yes, that he could possibly get into
in the town.
Yeah,
he's also the one that used to donate items to the museum, and so 2 photographs that he donated to the old museum. He's written on them. One of them is an early 1860 photo, and it was a photo of the early volunteer corps men, and he'd actually written underneath all the names of those people, so that was a wonderful thing. And the other one is the picture of the panorama of the town, also 1860, and he has written on that, when he gave it to the museum in the 1880s, any people who were in it, their names, and all the names of the buildings in this. Well, it's a 9-panel photograph, really.
Right. Okay.
So you see, he had a sense of history.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, he was one of the investors in that property that they set up in Queensland called Warrnambool Downs, which is near Winton, I believe, and that property is the Tozers were involved with that. That property is still there today, but they've taken an R and they've only got 1 R in Warrnambool. It's still called Warrnambool Downs in Queensland.
Right, okay.
So if you ever go through it, you'll know it came from here.
Some of its history, right here. Well, look at another fascinating story. So, and as you say, someone who's a bit of a special bond, perhaps, for the Historical Society today as well.
Right.